All right, so in this video, we're going to do two things. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to make it so our player, when they are big, so when we select our power up, if we get hit by the enemy, it's not going to lose a health, and instead we're going to become invulnerable for a couple of seconds there. And then the second thing that we're going to do is actually over here at the end. So I'm just going to do this real quick. Over here at the end, we're going to add in a little thing. This is just the object that we had available for us in our current assets, but you'd add in like a flag or something like that for the ending. And what we do is now when we interact with the ending, it takes us over here to our next scene. And as you can see, this is scene number 2. So we'll go ahead and get started on those things. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to jump into our power up script. And I'm just going to clean this up a little bit at the top. You don't have to if you don't have these, but I'm going to remove all these using statements here. And then next we're going to go down here into our apply power up effect method that we created. And right underneath where we're changing the player size, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get a reference to the player's to the player health component. So we're going to say player health, and then we'll say player health, and then that's going to equal our player dot get component player health here, and that's going to get the player health component from the player. And then we're going to say if the player health is not null, so as long as it's not empty, I forgot an equal sign there. So as long as it's not empty, then what we're going to want to do is we're just going to say player health dot, and we haven't created this yet, but we'll create this in a second. And we're going to say set, I'm going to call it set power up active. And I'm going to want to set this to true. And so we're going to have an error here for now. It's because it doesn't exist. That's all right. So we'll go ahead and we'll save that. And then I'm going to jump over to our player health script. And then just like in the other one, I'm going to go ahead and remove this just to clean it up a little bit there. So we're going to need a serialized field to start off with. And this is going to be of type vector 3. And it's going to be called, or I'm going to call it the original player scale. And it's going to equal a new vector 3. And I'm going to do 1F, 1F, 1F. That's the original size that we, the original player scale that we had. And then we're also going to need another bool. I'm going to go ahead and put it right under the one that we have already. And this one's going to be called is power. I'm going to call it is power up active. And I'm going to set it equal to false by default. And then now we're going to go down to our take damage method here. And then right underneath the first if statement here, we'll go ahead and we're going to check. We're going to do another if statement, and we're going to say if is power up active. And here we're going to go ahead and call a method called reset player size, and we'll create this in a second, but this will be how we reset the player size if the power up is active, so it puts them back down to the normal size. And then we're going to say is power up active, and we're going to change it to false because it will be active if we call this. So then we're going to change it to false, so it's no longer active. And next we're going to want to go ahead and do a start coroutine. And we're going to start the coroutine that we already have of activate invulnerability. So that's going to make the player invulnerable after they go small, just for 2 seconds there, or whatever our timer is set to. And then we're going to say return afterwards. So this way we don't end up reducing the player's health or anything like that if the power up was active at that time. So then we need to create this. So I'm just going to go down here right above where we have our die method, and we'll go ahead and create this. So we're going to do private void reset player size, and in here all we're going to do is we're going to do transform.local scale, and that's going to equal our original player scale. So that's going to set the player back to their original size. And then the last thing that we're going to need to do is down at the bottom, I think we'll put it down here. We're going to need a method to set the power up active flag that we created. So this one's going to be public void and set, we call this set power up active. And this is going to take in a bool of is active that we created. And so then we're going to say is power up active equals is active. So that's going to update the power up active flag. So back in our editor, one thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this and move this over here to make it a little bit easier for testing, so we don't have to run all the way over there every time. And then we'll go ahead and we'll play the game. And if we jump, we become bigger. That's great. Now when we become, well, we didn't lose a life, but it killed the enemy too fast there. I think we were landing on them at the same time, maybe. So let's go ahead and just stand here. So we become small. We don't actually lose a life, and we become invulnerable for a couple seconds there. So that seems like it is working as we would expect. So we'll go ahead and try it one more time here just to make sure, but we're big. Health stays at 3. We're not taking any damage. We're flashing like we're invulnerable, and then we go back to being vulnerable. So that seems like it is working as expected. And the next thing that we're going to add is going to be a ending for our levels. So if we scroll over here to the right, we're just going to add in something here where if the player interacts with it, it's going to take us to the next level. Looking at the assets that we currently have in the game, there's not a whole lot for this. So I'm actually just going to use this winter tree, I think, or maybe one of this flower. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this into our scene here, up towards the end over here. And then next thing I'm going to do is we're going to add a component, and we're going to need a collider. So I think I'm just going to use a capsule collider 2D here. And then we're going to mark that as is trigger as well for when the player interacts with it. And then over here, I'm just going to rename it to like level end or something along those lines. Now, if we go back and we'll need to create a new script, and I'm just going to call this one end level. And before we open up the script, we're going to need to actually make a new scene. So I'm going to go into our scenes folder, select the scene that we have, and just do a Control-D to duplicate that. And then we're going to rename this one just to scene 2 for now. And then double click, save that, and go into it. So over here, you can see that we're now in scene 2. And instead of changing a whole bunch of stuff in the scene for now, first thing what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select this first ground that we have here and go to the sprite render and just change the color to like maybe a green or something like that. So it's super obvious that we are in this scene. Then I'm going to go ahead and save that and jump back into, or actually before we jump back into the first scene, while we're in scene 2, let's go ahead and go to File, Build Settings, and then click on Add Open Scenes. And that's going to add in the scene 2 that you can see here. So we can go ahead and close out of that. And now we can go back into our first scene. And then now we can go ahead and open up the script that we just created here for ending the level. So we'll go ahead and just going to remove these using statements at the top, and then we're going to add in a new one, and this is going to be using Unity Engine .scene management. And now we can remove, start, and update as well, as we won't need those. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set up a private void, and then this is going to be on trigger enter 2D. So this method is going to be called when the collider, or when another collider enters the trigger that it's colliding with. So in this case, we're going to be checking for the players. So we're going to do if, and then we're going to say if the collision dot compare tag. And then in here, we're going to be looking for the player tag. And so if the player does collide with this object, we're going to say load next level. And then this hasn't been created yet. But if we just hover over that, we can generate the method. That's going to create it down here below. And all we need to do in here is we're just going to say int current scene index. And that's going to equal our scene manager dot get active scene dot build index. So that's going to get the index number of the current scene that we're in. And then all we want to do next is call scene manager dot load scene and then current scene index +1. So it's going to load the scene that's one scene after our current scene. And that should be all that we have to do in here. All right, so back in our editor here, I'm just gonna go ahead and select the player and move them over here to make this easier for testing. And then we'll go ahead and click on play here. And you'll notice that it's actually, we can't see the little flower for some reason. The Z axis, we just need to adjust this. We should be able to put it down to 0 here. And then now if we come back in here, we can see it just fine. We're also still not colliding with it, but that's just because we didn't add the script that we created. So if we go ahead, add that script, and now test one more time. When we collide with the flower this time, we should end up going to the next level. So now we're in level 2. And so then, you'd continue on, and we'd keep going down, to the next level and so on and so forth. So obviously you'd want to change this level to a new level, but this is gonna work, and this is taking us to the next level now.